Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack. This is the new year. It's time for taking stock, for looking back and looking forward. Janus, the Roman god, had two faces. One was facing out, one was facing back. It's important for each of us to take stock of our lives at certain periods or certain points. It's also very important for institutions to take a look at where they're headed and where they've been. It's just for many reasons, but especially when we're thinking strategically about how organizations impact their community, how they live within community, and how they really have an impact. So, how important do you think it is for organizations to take stock, take a look at themselves?
I think it's incredibly important. You've said it, just as we do for our own personal lives. You have to do it in whatever institution you're in, organization, company, church. If you don't stop every now and then and look hard at who you are and what you want to do and where you want to be in the future, you just get stuck.
My guest today is Michelle Bogue-Trost. She's the pastor at Central United Methodist Church. No stranger to Encounter. You were on just about 2 months ago. Welcome to Encounter.
Thank you.
So your congregation, Central United Methodist Church, has been doing some looking back and looking forward.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what's been going on there.
When I arrived, when I was appointed there by our bishop 4.5 years ago, one of the stated concerns, one of the stated goals was that I would help them create a vision. And that was it.
Right.
Help us to create a vision.
That's a big, that's a loaded
no
term,
pressure.
isn't it?
Yeah. Well, a vision for what? For how long? For, so we began the conversations exactly at where we're at. Who are we now? Where have we come from? There's a lot of storytelling and a lot of memory that has to happen,
right.
Especially for a new pastor coming in.
You don't even know the history or the stories or even any of the people really at that point, right?
No, because I'm even from a different former Methodist conference.
Well, you're from Albany originally? Or?
Right, I'm from the former Troy Annual Conference.
Right.
So I came to what's the former Wyoming Conference that didn't know anybody.
Right.
So there was a lot of conversation, question, who are we? Where have we come from? And more importantly, where do we want to be? What do we want to look like? How do we want to exist in the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years? What does that look like, and how do we make that happen?
Now, was this a facilitated conversation, or was something that you led?
That was something I led.
Okay.
I have a lot of training in church. I'm a church consultant, and so I've got a lot of training and experience.
Now, where do you begin when you're thinking about that?
You begin with relationship.
Right.
Nothing, no change can happen, no taking stock can happen unless there's some trust. And so really it's relationship building and getting to know folks and getting to know who they are and where they are as they are. And so the first part of that process really was getting to know you and building those relationships and building trust.
So 4.5 years ago when you came into the situation and you were building that trust, how long did it take for you to get to the point where you felt like you had something to work with?
Oh, we had something to work with immediately. Central is a very vibrant congregation, very well-established, very strong laity, very strong sense of purpose and mission.
Right.
So there was a lot to work with. Nothing was broken. It was the call for a vision was really out of an understanding from a knowledgeable base of people that we really need to look at the future.
Right.
So, so we had a lot to work with from the beginning, and we were able to continue ministries and keep things going. And there was nothing to fix. So it took some time to build the trust and to learn each other's language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what did I mean by vision? What do they mean by vision? What do we mean when we're talking about the neighborhood and the community and the world? What do we mean when we're talking about what church is and what church is supposed to be? Learning each other's language is a huge part of that. So that, 6 months to a year of that, and talking at the same time about what does vision mean for this congregation? What do you see happening in our future? What do you see are places where we need to grow or change, or not?
Were there any foundational stories that they would talk about as far as things that happened in their past that are impacting perhaps how they're approaching this?
Absolutely. Central has always been very mission and service oriented.
Mm-hmm.
They have a free clothing center, for example, that's
Right.
been going for 50 years.
Right.
A free dinner every Thursday night that's been going for 20 some odd years. No, we can't figure out how long, but 27 or 28 years. So service and mission have always been part of their DNA. Also, social action. In the 60s, they developed an integrated camp at Sky Lake.
Oh, right.
And fostered a camp that people of all races could be part of. And this is the 60s we're talking about.
Right.
So that Lukens-Jackson camp legacy is huge, and a huge part of their understanding of who they are. Going farther back, the legend is, I don't know if it's true, I don't know, but the legend is that the church was built by EJ workers
Mm-hmm.
without Johnson money.
Oh, wow.
So if you think about that, there's a sense of sort of plucky, we can do it ourselves, we can make things happen. If we've got the vision and we've got the dream, we can make things happen.
Well, as long as the story is alive and people are telling it.
Right. It's a factor.
It's a factor.
Power.
It's something that comes out. It doesn't really matter if it happened or not. It's just the way that.
Exactly. So with all of that, I mean, part of that storytelling and getting to know you is knowing all those pieces. Right? Knowing also about this area, knowing that Binghamton was a stop sort of on the westward trail, and knowing that this is a place where some people decided not to go and some people decided to go. And so that sort of change and piece of the history of the area, there's DNA we carry from the area around us. And so listening to those stories and sort of piecing together those details and learning how DNA, even from 100 years ago, affects who we are now, it carries.
And how important were their faith commitments? It's one thing to talk about the westward migration or the the settlement in the area or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But what were some of the faith stories that were shared?
I think folks at Central were very aware of being one of a multitude of Methodist churches. Broome
Right.
County has something like 40-something.
It's amazing how many
United Methodist churches, and they're not the result of EUB churches merging with Methodist churches. That's a whole piece of history, but they're not like former EUB churches. They're all Methodist churches. So there's
Right.
a very strong Methodist identity in Broome County, and the Methodist identity of personal piety and social holiness knit together, I think is huge. Even if people can't articulate it, it's in that way. It's a big piece of who we are as Methodists in this area.
Well, that was what Wesley said. There is no personal holiness without social holiness.
Exactly.
So you have to have the two wed together.
You do.
And it seems that in your own congregational history that it's kind of been a part of the DNA.
I think it has. And so what great bones to work with. I mean, this congregation in particular has great stories and great foundational pieces to work with.
And so as you've been thinking about what your future looks like after you've rehearsed a lot of this stuff in the past, what are some of the conversations that are going around the future?
Well, we had to stop for a bit and look at the present. Mm-hmm. What do things look like now? What does it look like now with sort of the IBM aftermath,
right?
Which is still very profoundly near the surface.
Well, it must
here.
have been it must have impacted your congregation hugely.
It did. We had a large number of people who were either relocated or terminated and relocated themselves. So there was that. But there's still that feeling around the IBM departure. And name it what you like.
Right.
I've heard all the names for it. So, so there's that. There's the aftermath of 200-year floods.
Right.
Within 5 years, one of which affected the building we're in.
How badly was it affected?
Not badly as most. We flooded, the basement flooded with groundwater, not river water. So the recovery, there was recovery to do, but it was not devastating.
Right.
So what do we do in a community that has sort of sheer numbers of job loss, plus this sense of flood after flood and the sort of hopelessness that is in this air, in this area around that? What do we do with that? What do we do with our changing neighborhood? I mean, we're right in the Union District of Endicott, so what do we do with that? There's more and more absentee landlords, there's fewer jobs, there's less opportunity, and we're seeing folks' economic scale changing in the neighborhood. It's not a suburban neighborhood. It's not an IBM neighborhood anymore. So what does that look like as we think about who we are as church?
Because as we've talked about this, you and I, but as Binghamton has become more of a student housing area, a lot of the poor and people that require rental facilities are kind of moving out of that area and are looking for places to live. And
we're seeing a lot of that in Endicott.
In Endicott, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for affordable rent, and affordable rent in Binghamton is becoming very, very difficult to find. And so Endicott is becoming a place where people are going.
Right.
So how has that impacted the life of the church then?
We've begun in our mission and outreach conversations to talk about how do we take into account the changing face of the neighborhood, the changing nature of the neighborhood. Folks who may not have been part of church before, or who have just relocated here, haven't found a church, may not want to, may not know how to. How do we do that? How do we care for the neighborhood? Mm-hmm. You know, do we need to look at mission opportunities beyond our dinner and our clothing center?
Right.
And what do we do for folks who just don't know how to approach church?
Right. And how? So if you have people that have not been churched for a long period, well, ever, some of them. I mean, they're coming into the area. They're wanting. They may be looking to be connected in other. You know, we don't know what they're looking for in some ways until they're asked. But how do you go about doing a community needs assessment and trying to figure out what the strengths of your congregation are and how they can meet those?
It's all the same process: storytelling, relationship building. Mm-hmm. It's talking with the folks who come to Shepherd's Supper. It's talking with the folks in the clothing center. It's talking with the leadership of the church and trying to see where there are common threads.
Now, I was involved with a church in Chicago called LaSalle Street Church. It existed kind of in between the Gold Coast of Chicago at the time, which was upper middle management in many of the corporations that existed in that area. And then a lot of their ministries were in like Green and other places where there was high concentrations of poverty. and they were trying to call themselves a bridge church, where they're bridging the needs that exist in both of those communities. Your congregation was kind of like a middle management.
Yes.
And middle management for IBM, and a lot of those people come from that kind of a perspective. How important is it for them to, because you're not wanting just to minister to someone. You're not just looking to throw
stuff at people.
But you're understanding that there's something that within them that is required in the church itself.
Yes.
And how do you do that? What are some of the ways that you approach that?
We've begun thinking in terms of how do we open our doors? How do we make our place more accessible? Not just Sunday mornings,
right?
Though we're working on that too, in a lot of different ways, constantly, as every church is. But how do we make our place a place that people see as not a club or a fortress, but as a community center? So there's that. We're also trying to reach another population as well. We are a moderate to liberal church. We're a reconciling congregation in the United Methodist Church. And so, center to left-leaning theologically, socially. And so we, as a welcoming church for the LGBTQA community, are looking for folks in that population, in that community, and the community around that community who have been left out of church or rejected from church. So we're opening in several different directions, and how do we create a vision for that kind of openness?
My guest today is Michelle Bogue-Trost, and we've been talking about developing a vision for Central United Methodist Church, and maybe others who are listening in will hear maybe stories that they may be able to relate to, because all congregations in some way are in the same boat as far as trying to develop mission and trying to develop vision for their community. So one of the things that you've told me about that you're kind of looking at developing is, especially for those people who have been unchurched, is the idea of a church within a church, a church of people who need to kind of learn what church is about for themselves.
Well, yes.
In some ways.
Creating a community for people to do faith together that doesn't always look like traditional Sunday morning church.
Right.
When we came to a vision place, when we came to a vision that we could embrace, the leadership of the church, that is, we decided that one component of that was creating this church within a church, congregation without walls. It's really hard to pin it down because we're still creating it. But developing a core vision team to say, what is it that's missing around us? What is it for folks who have never been churched or have been dischurched? People who've been burned by church, excluded from church, and specifically bearing in mind the LGBTQA community. How do we provide a place where people can grow in faith, understand and know the promises of God for themselves, in a place that's safe? And what does that look like? We're still creating that vision, but what it means is we're not just creating another worship service, which is never a bad thing, but we're not expecting folks to come and do church like we do church. So we're creating non-traditional events in unexpected places at unexpected times that we're hoping will attract persons who do want to do some good in the world and want to grow in faith, or at least learn about faith, explore matters spiritual. How can we create places and times for people to do that safely, and maybe do some good in the world, and maybe become more interested?
So what would one of those, just thinking theoretically, what would it look like? What would go on?
Theoretically, fun events and service events. So
Right.
we've already had one of our fun events. We hosted a beer and carols evening at a restaurant. Right
There you go.
Service events, though, would be like creating a meetup, creating an event, Facebook, whatever, to show up on a Saturday and clean up a park, or to show up on a Saturday at a laundromat with a bunch of quarters and do laundry, help people do laundry. There's a church in Whitney Point doing that. It's wonderful. It's a great idea. Creating opportunities for people to have a one-time event, no pressure, no hype, to do some good, make the world a little bit better for one day's worth of work or one afternoon's worth of work, and in the process, talk about why we're doing that. Talk about the ways that God calls us to shepherd other people or to shepherd creation or whatever. We're still developing those. We've created a staff position, a person who would create those opportunities for us. That would also tie into the mission mindedness of the existing congregation.
Now, I'll throw out an idea for you.
Yeah.
One of the places I love to walk is the IBM Glen. It's up on it's run by the Waterman Conservation Society, and they have a little place that's right there in the middle of a field where they have it set it up with benches, and it looks like it's made for a congregation, but it's in the middle of nature.
Yeah.
It would be a great place for a congregation like this to go and to talk about the importance of creation care and stewardship of the earth, and and then be able to take a walk and maybe pick up some trash or do some good for the area that would kind of lead toward a deeper appreciation for the environment. But these are interesting conversations for a church to be in, because often congregations tend to focus on their building, right?
Yes.
And for something like this to happen, they have to begin thinking differently. And what is the big difference, do you think?
Because we're not ignoring the traditional congregation. This vision plan really creates sort of two expressions of Central. Right now we're calling them Central 1.0 and Central 2.0 because we don't have any better names. And that's the handles we're hanging them on. But Central 1.0 is still a thriving, vibrant, traditional church that we want to grow and keep growing and keep vibrant past the lifespan of its current members. And so we're doing things. We are upgrading the building. We are doing some really neat and innovative things with social media and signage and things like that. We've just done an amazing capital campaign to restore the organ. So we're taking care and still shepherding Central 1.0 as we're creating Central 2.0 at the same time, and creating staff that are creating bridges between the two.
Right.
So we're not leaving anybody out. Nobody's being left behind. Nobody's being ignored so that we can do this new thing.
Right.
And I think that's been key here, because that's the context here at Central.
Because oftentimes when you have these new ideas coming in, you tend to view it as, I'm in this camp and I'm in this camp.
Right.
Instead of it being about us and about who we are as a body of Christian believers who are together in this boat, this mix that we know of as like this mess, I guess, that we know of.
Well, and we're hoping that these mission, service, event opportunities, we're creating those as bridges between 1.0 and 2.0, since that is a foundational DNA piece of the church. Right.
And the stories that will emerge from that will be pretty profound. I mean, when you have... So for us, when we talk about building a wheelchair ramp, for instance, and I know that Central has been involved in several of those wheelchair ramps that we've been building, we view them as being a bridge between the person who's in the house and the people who are coming there to help. And the stories that emerge from that are pretty profound.
They are. And we're waiting with great excitement to see what those stories are. I mean, we just voted on this vision in May.
Oh, right.
So this is new, and we are still feeling our way through it. We have a vision team for each expression of Central that's extremely excited, both of them. And so we're creating it, and it's all with a profound sense of wonder at the ways that God has been part of this process and has inspired the work we're doing. Some things that have come together that can only be described as God-led, and it really has been an incredible process of getting to this point, and the way things have lined up and fallen into place, and it's exciting and breathtaking all at the same time.
It's got to be a fun place to lead.
It is. It really is. The laity and the leadership at Central are phenomenal. They're wonderful people, and they have a heart for God and for mission and serving the community, and they actually are willing to take some risks.
Now, I'm friends with a number of your congregation on Facebook, and I can tell you that they brag about you all the time. There's a lot of support, it sounds like, for the mission and the leadership of the church.
There is, and that's been that process of trust and relationship building. And you know, this vision it's not necessarily a permanent vision. This is what we're trying now.
Right.
And what we learn from it will teach us how to go from there.
Well, it seems like that would be something that IBMers would gravitate toward, because, I mean, they would walk in through the sign, and the sign would say, think, right?
Right.
So you're kind of telling them, be playful at church just as you were playful at work.
Right. Because, you know, if we fail at something, if we make a mistake or make a misstep, it teaches us what not to do next time. It doesn't teach us to stop. It just teaches us where we need to adjust. And so I think the leadership of the church is looking at it that way.
Right.
Sure, we'll try this and see where it leads us. Because God's been in it so far, and none of us think God is going to just drop us.
God will never drop you.
No.
And that is
it's
the
exciting stuff.
Well, Michelle, it was great to have you on Encounter again.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and it's always good to have a conversation with a fellow minister about things that they've been thinking about. And for all of you, I hope that you have a great Sunday and a great January as you look forward and as you look back. Have a great day.